Welcome back. You having a good day? Doing okay?
Wonderful.
Semester's over?
It is, finally.
It's good. We, in this session, Caldoun, we're talking about doubt. And I know that you have written extensively on some of these things and published and also thought and spoken in a variety of contexts on this topic. And I mean, almost jokingly, do Christians have doubt?
Not at all.
Yeah, right. Of course, right? We doubt.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could just talk for a few minutes. What are some of the doubts you have witnessed some people having, maybe in your classroom or in places you've spoken at, or people you've even mentored or discipled? What are some of the things people doubt as Christians that are common, that are maybe kind of like, let me breathe a little bit, let my hair down a little bit, like, oh, I'm not alone?
In 2006, I lost my son. I went through a darkness that took me a long time to recover from. And even still, even now, it's a struggle. Doubt is something that I struggled with for many years. Even now, I go through periods of questions that I just don't have answers to. This is part of being human. We can't expect to have the answers to all these things. Absolute certainty is impossible. It's actually an illusion. I have to first come to grips with that. But that does not mean I should ignore my doubts. There are different types of doubts, Oliver. There are doubts that people have, intellectual doubts, academic doubts, legitimate doubts about historicity of the Bible, or the veracity of the truthfulness of the words of Jesus, regarding sexuality, regarding race, regarding culture, regarding science. Those are legitimate doubts that you may have. Then there's another level of doubt that's deeper, psychological. It's a type of doubt that's like an existential struggle with your own being. Am I worthy of God's love? Am I worthy to even get up and see the sun on my own face? Those are questions that we struggle with in ourselves. Does God love me? Those are deeper levels of doubt. Both need to be addressed differently. Sometimes we address one without addressing the other. Somebody will come to you and say, why does God allow evil? Well, they're not really asking the question at an academic level for you to give a propositional answer. In St. Thomas Aquinas fashion. Maybe they're asking for a way that Soren Kierkegaard will answer as an existential struggle, the type of struggle that Abraham may have gone through when God told him, take your son, your very son, and sacrifice him. That's the type of doubt that they're struggling with. Once we're able to identify the type of doubt, then we can adequately answer it, or address it at least.
So when we're experiencing doubt, we really want to, I hear you saying, it's important we take it out and look at it from all different angles and try to understand the doubt. What level is it at? Where is it at? What exactly are we doubting, or things are we doubting when it comes to spirituality or God, or maybe our doubt is even with God himself and who he claims to be. Mm-hmm. There seems to be a misconception out here, at least in some of the experiences I've had, where Christians shouldn't doubt. And sometimes these misconceptions I have found exist in the church. It's almost like there is a misconception among some Christians of it's not okay for me to doubt. Why would I doubt? I mean, the Bible tells me not to doubt and to put all my anxieties and concerns on the Lord and things like that. And so there's this almost misconception of it's not okay for me to have any questions or doubt. And if I do, that means I must be sinning, or I must be far from God or something like that. It's almost it's bad to have. And so I'm wondering, where does such thinking derive from? What do you think?
I think we can look at it in different contexts. For example, the opposite of love is not hate. Love and hate come from the same basic passion towards somebody. The opposite of love is a form of indifference, where you just don't care, right? I think the opposite of faith is not doubt. I think faith and doubt are in the same wings of the same plane in your own life. I think they balance each other out. One of the gentlemen came to Jesus. It wasn't the centurion. It was a man, Jairus, his daughter, I believe. Mm-hmm. He asked him to heal his daughter, and Jesus said,
she's ill.
Do you believe I could do this? He said, I do, but help my unbelief. And Jesus didn't condemn him for that.
That's the father of the boy who's at the bottom of the Mount Transfiguration, and he's foaming and chomping at the mouth, but you're exactly right. The father
was
cries
the one.
out.
Thank you. It wasn't Jairus' daughter? I thought it was. Anyway.
Yeah. We don't know his name, but the father cries out.
Help my unbelief.
Help my unbelief. What a beautiful passage.
Does Jesus condemn that? No, he doesn't condemn that. Isaiah struggled. Job struggled. Even Jesus himself cried out in the garden, my God, my God. In the garden, he cried out, if it's possible, let this cup be passed from me, right? He struggled with doubt. Even the Son of God. So you're in good company when you struggle with doubt. It's okay. Cry out to the one who is the answer, not just the one who has the answer.
So,
Let me illustrate.
yeah.
In his book, How to Pray When You're Pissed at God,
That sounds like a good title.
the author talks about as a chaplain, he worked at a hospital, and he had a young boy who was in the early teens who told his mother he was an atheist. He didn't have anything to do with God, so he called him in to talk to the chaplain to talk to him. And he went in and talked to the young boy who had this very debilitating muscular disease who prevented him from going out and spending what he wanted to do most of all, be with his friends. And he struggled with that and told him, I'm mad at God and I don't have anything to do with him. I don't believe in him. Well, there's a difference between not believing in God and being mad at God. And he told the boy, well, what do you have doubts about God? He said, why has he done this to me? You mean, why has he forsaken you? He said, yes. He told him, what I want you to do is repeat these words after me. Ilahi, ilahi, la shabaktini. So the young man did. So what am I saying? You're saying exactly what Jesus said. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to struggle.
When he was on the cross,
Say
right?
it to God.
Yeah.
And his mother would come in and the nurses would come in and see him yelling, Ilahi, ilahi, shabaktini. What is the young man doing? He's praying.
And translate that for us, because not everybody here might be familiar with
It's
that.
Aramaic for my God, my God.
Why have you forsaken me? Yeah.
Change your doubt into that pulls you away from God into a cry that draws you to him.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is beautiful. And I think of even another figure, Thomas, right? When he's doubting Jesus' resurrection, and he's allowed to have those doubts. But for some reason, there are some Christians in this world, our brothers and sisters, who have somehow put on a front, an overconfident front almost, a smug front, dare we say? I don't know. That we can't doubt, we don't have a doubt. And that almost is a turnoff for, I think, people in this world who are searching for answers and trying to find a way forward in their doubt. And the more refreshing way is to be like Jesus and those around him who have embraced their doubt and owned it and brought it out into the light and wrestled with it. I think we have to address that and make sure we aren't creating that misconception or reinforcing that stereotype.
Yeah, well said.
I want to ask you this question. You've already kind of shared a little bit of it. Maybe you can be a little bit more articulate. You lost your son. I didn't know this. How old was your son?
He was one.
He was 1 year old. And this was in 2006, you said, right? What was his name?
Enoch.
Enoch. So Enoch passes. And what exactly did you begin to doubt? Can you walk us into that a little bit and what that looked like?
Enoch died. He was in my arms when he died. He was just a baby. His lungs were not able to receive the proper amount of oxygen to give him life. It was a very difficult period for me. I remember holding him and telling him, Enoch, one day I will walk on streets of gold with you. One day we will see each other again. As I put him down and the doctors took him away, I began to reflect upon that. If what I said to him was not true, ontologically true, it is just my own subjective concoctions, saying it to make myself feel comfortable. If there isn't a resurrection from the dead, if Jesus' words where he said, because I live, you shall live as well, and because he proved it by rising from the dead, I can trust that I will also see my son again. I knew that intellectually, Oliver. What I didn't know is emotionally, psychologically. I knew how to deal with the questions, but I didn't know how, intellectually speaking, academically speaking, I didn't know how to deal with them emotionally.
Yeah. So how'd you figure that out?
It took some time. I had to grieve. It took some time. I had to let out those emotions of pain and sadness. I had to allow myself time to grieve, time to cry, time to weep, to spend time with others who can hold me up when I'm down.
Did you have to learn how to do that?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. As an academic, we didn't even address those issues. Those are for the weak people. Yeah, we don't need to address those. And suddenly I find myself on the kitchen floor weeping in a fetal position like a child.
Well, I think our culture also doesn't, we've really created a culture where grief is swept under a rug, and we're not allowed to feel those emotions. And I think there's still some cultures out there. I think of our Jewish brothers and sisters in particular, those Orthodox who sit Shiva. They have held on to some of the key traditions in terms of processing grief. And we aren't always inheriting those traditions, but it is something we have to learn how to navigate. And that's in the midst of those feelings of grief, it is so easy for us to doubt the existence of God and His presence.
It is. If you don't have a solid grounding in apologetics, let me clarify exactly what that is. That's the art and science of providing answers to the most difficult questions of life. If you're not reading about it, if you're not articulating it, if you're not answering or dealing with questions on a deep intellectual level, or questions that are very problematic, whether the veracity of the scriptures, the deity of Christ, etc. If you don't struggle with those right now, when the time comes, you will ask yourself, is this all some kind of cosmic joke? But when you know what you believe is actually true and not based on your subjective whims, then you can hold on to that anchor in the storm.
Yeah.
You can hold on to it because you know it's true, independent of whether you believe it or not.
So I hear you saying it's really important. One of the things that's helpful for those of us who doubt is to remember the story that we've been exposed to. And for those of us who haven't been exposed to the story, to perhaps expose ourselves to the story, to discover the story. Because I think the more we remember the story, the more we're in it, the more we're rehearsing it. And what I mean by story, I mean God's story in the Bible, His truths, His way of life, the things He's claimed to have done. The more we remember that, sometimes that holds us as an anchor point in the midst of our doubt.
Exactly.
We may emotionally feel distant, but if we can just return sometimes to home, so to speak, and discover home within ourselves again, that can sometimes be the grounding force that brings us back, holds us from flying out into the outer ethos of life.
Right.
We can stay anchored. So
when Job struggled, one of the ways you can really anger the demonic is to hold on to your faith in the darkest storms of life.
And for those who don't know the story of Job, Job is a story in the Bible that some people find the book and they think the book is named Job. It's Job. But Job is his name, and he's a man who loses everything, right? The story tells us how he lost his family members, his property, his livestock, everything except his wife. And he ends up having to navigate it. And
even she turns against him.
She turns against him, tells him to curse God, and he refuses to do so. He finds a way to hold on and anchor and remain connected somehow despite the anxiety and the anger and the emotion he's feeling.
And God rewards him double at the end. It says of Job, "You have not spoken to me of me, as my servant Job has, rightly." Right.
I had a friend who wrote a whole dissertation on that one verse right there. It's an important verse in chapter 42. So I want to wrap things up with this question, because I think there's a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians, who have doubt and they're struggling with things. They're trying to navigate what they believe, whether they're Christian or not Christian. What do we believe in this world, and what do I do with the doubts I have about spiritual things? What recommendation, what encouragement would you want to give to somebody if you had a chance to help them navigate that?
You don't want to tell them, just believe. Because the cults will tell you the same thing. Follow the bosom, the fire in your own bosom. The Mormons follow that, so do Jehovah's Witnesses. So do any groups can follow that. But how many of them ground it in archaeology and science and evidence? Don't just follow what you believe. No, follow what's true and then believe that. So when you struggle with doubt, find everything you can muster to dig that doubt into the ground. Research it. Find an answer to it. If you don't know the answer, find somebody who does. You'll be surprised how many other Christians have struggled with these doubts throughout the centuries. Whether it's a synoptic problem that you're struggling with, whether it's the deity of Christ issues you're struggling with, those are doubt. You're not the only one. Recognize, research the doubt. Recognize you're not alone. Understand that absolute certainty is impossible. Trust God through it. That He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life."
I got a couple things in my mind right now, but one of them is, I know for myself, I've sometimes doubted God's word or things that he has said or the story even. And I have found that it has proved to be true, at least for myself, that when I have dug down deeper and deeper and researched more and more, as objectively as possible, obviously everything's going to have subjective slant to a degree, but the more I have researched something, the more I have tried to anchor myself in the story to understand its context, its background, its historicity, these types of things, the more I have found things continue to check out more often than they don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm always quite surprised at that. It's remarkable to discover those things.
I remember reading in Augustine, he said, when I come across a passage in the scriptures where the author seems to be saying something that's against the scientific understanding of the world around me, either the author of the scripture or the book that I'm reading, whether it's Matthew or others, that's mistaken, the manuscript himself that I'm reading may be mistaken, or I am not understanding it.
And how often do we fail to take ownership at that level, especially today, where everything else is wrong but me? And I wonder how many areas of society are breaking down because of that mentality. Yeah. And I think there's a humility that comes with, you know what, something must be wrong here. Let me take a few minutes to figure that out and dig deeper into it. So doubt's okay. And I think we should all breathe easy because pastors, professors, apologists, mothers, garbage men, doctors, lawyers, we all doubt.
And in the doubt, never forget, because you can't see him doesn't mean he can't see you.
Yeah. Yeah, he's bigger than our doubt. And maybe, just as Jesus was compassionate and gracious to Thomas and allowed himself to be revealed to Thomas the way Thomas needed to see him, maybe Jesus will do that for each of us and our own doubt.
Well said, brother.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate these conversations, and I look forward to the next one.